Welcome to Resistance Live for the 18th of July, 2024. I'm coming to you from my brand new dining room. I'm exhausted, literally operating on 3 hours of sleep. You all don't need my transnational moving story. Maybe I'll share it on Progressive Coffee Hour next time. But woo, I'm wiped, but there's so many reasons to be here. And I'm really glad you're here too. So we have so much to talk about today. I know there's an awful lot of concern on the Patreon feed about the reports of what Schumer and Pelosi and Adam Schiff have been doing behind the scenes, among others. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the RNC. We're going to talk about how to keep your chin up because I feel like we all need it today. But first things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a black sleeveless top. You guys are going to see a lot of repeating clothing here until all my stuff arrives from the West Coast. As I said, I'm sitting in my new dining room. So I am behind me is a set of floating shelves. I have a staircase kind of off to my right-hand shoulder. And this is not my office. I have a whole office set up in here, but there's no desk in it yet. And I'm sorry if the acoustics are very echoey, but this is how it's going to be for the next little while until we get totally set up. All right. So big questions this morning about what is going on with particularly white Democratic leaders on the Hill. I just want to point out that, you know, within the last half an hour, Alex Padilla, the senator from California, has given yet another interview among many, many Democratic leaders of color, full-throatedly endorsing Joe Biden. And while it is certainly the case that Hakeem Jeffries has apparently been a part of a meeting with Joe Biden where he's relayed concerns about what some of the folks in the Democratic Party in the House have had to say about Biden's candidacy, the vast majority of people who are out front at this moment calling for Biden to step aside are white. And if you haven't noticed this, you should have. Sheila Jackson Lee was out here this morning, full-throated endorsement of Joe Biden. We've had pretty much every black and brown leader in the Senate and the House of Representatives in our party endorsing Joe Biden. I personally am finding it very disturbing how this split is taking place along racial lines. You know, again, I have to say that I feel as though this is not listening to the will of the voters. I pay very close attention to people like Sherilyn Ifill, former legal counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I think she was the head of it, actually, who has been talking about the fact, among others, including Joy Reid, that, you know, black and brown voters have a different perspective on what's possible in this election and a different lens through which they are viewing all of these nominations than many other folks do. Yes, of course, I know about Bernie, but, you know, I just have to point out that okay, bye. We've already got one troll here today. All right, I'm going to do my best to keep going and not be interfered with by the trolls, you guys, but I want everyone to be mindful that I'm kind of like operating with a temporary setup here. Okay, so, you know, again, I just want to point out that the split of along these lines is really distressing. And it's distressing for a number of reasons. It's distressing because there seems to be a coalescing right now of white Democrats calling for Biden to step aside in defiance of black and brown Democrats who are full-throatedly supporting him staying in. Women and people of color generally are supporting Biden staying in the race. And yet we are seeing this attempt essentially, whether it's born of panic or fear or trauma or money, which is another issue that we'll talk about in a minute, calling for Biden to step aside. And personally, I'm finding it, as you all know, very distressing. I'm also just going to point out that somebody on the Patreon feed this morning said, oh, well, Nancy Pelosi isn't a white man. And Nancy Pelosi is about as like engaged in the establishment Democratic Party as anybody has ever been. And, you know, I have to point out that I personally, when I see black and brown leaders calling for any particular policy, I have a tendency, and I think we all probably should, to listen to that first. Because, you know, again, there is a lens there through which those of us with my complexion generally don't see the world because of the nature of white privilege. And personally, you know, I mean, anti-racism is something we should all be educated in, but I'm also just going to say one other thing here, okay? I think the lens through which black women particularly, who have historically been the most loyal voting base of the Democratic Party, should count for something. I think it should count for something. And I'm particularly fed up at this moment in time with how this is going, all right? So The reporting itself, because I want to be really clear on this, is that there has been a meeting between Biden and Hakeem Jeffries about what some members of the House are saying, that there has been a meeting between Schumer and Biden, which has apparently been much more forceful. And then, of course, we have Adam Schiff coming out claiming that Biden should step aside. I'm just going to tell you all, there are reasons why I voted for Barbara Lee. We talked about this at the time. Nobody wanted to listen to me on this, but I'm going to tell you right now that I have had some doubts about Adam Schiff in a senatorial role for a while. I think he did a great job in the impeachment. I think he has been a tremendous leader in the House. I had very serious concerns as a Californian about his ability to be a senator truly representing all of California. All right. And I think the fact that Alex Padilla is out there endorsing Joe Biden right now says something about where we're at, because he is, of course, the other senator from California, with Adam Schiff at the moment predicted to win. I'm going to say more about that in a minute also. I do not know what the end result of this is going to be. All right. We do know that Joe Biden was diagnosed again with COVID yesterday. I'm just going to say that all these, I had to mind my words when I was threading about this from the airplane yesterday, because the people who are calling for Biden to step aside because he caught COVID truly are enraging me. You know, like there are so few people I know now that have not had COVID. I managed to avoid it until January of this year, and I still continuously mask whenever I'm inside anywhere. I think that the idea that somehow Joe Biden getting COVID when he's got Paxlovid and the best medical team probably on the planet is truly specious and really just piling on. All right. I will say, though, that we are in a very strange moment. All right. I know there have been a lot of concerns about big money donors putting their money on hold for Joe Biden. I'm also just going to point out that the stats are such that something like 98% of the donations that have made up the Biden war chest do not come from those big money donors. They come actually from people like you and me. They're under $200 donations in most instances. So the idea that that somehow the money, we should be following the money, which is what a lot of people said to me on Threads this morning. I don't buy that either. There's something else going on, and I don't know whether it is just straight panic about potentially losing the election for stupid reasons when the whole voting base, or the vast majority of the voting base, doesn't want Biden to step aside. I think it is an incredible degree of self-sabotage, to the point where I'm just blown away by the fact of it. I do not understand it. You know, we have the RNC going on where literally insane things are happening every 5 minutes. People were walking around last night with signs saying mass deportation now, which is like straight fascism. And what are the Democrats doing? They're sabotaging their own candidate, white Democrats. I'm so bothered by it. And, you know, even if the end result is what they want, right? Like, let's just say hypothetically, Biden does happen to step aside. There is no alternative plan. No one is proposing an alternative plan that is in unity. Nobody is saying, like, we're all going to get behind Kamala Harris. In fact, people are talking about passing her over. And I'm just going to repeat something that has been said over and over and over again by Black women activists on Threads, re-endorsed by Joy Reid. If they pass by Kamala Harris, and Biden steps aside, we lose. We lose. We lose. It will be like the biggest betrayal of Black women by the Democratic Party in a very long time. So, you know, this is all incredibly dangerous, precipitous territory. And I personally think that at this point, I'm worried. You know, how could I not be worried? I understand why all of you were worried. There were so many people on the Patreon feed that were like talking me off the ledge. I can't talk you guys off the ledge on this one. I think what the Democratic Party is doing is inexplicable, frankly. You know, you have an incredible president with an incredible legacy set up to run again, who had one bad debate night, who has done a whole series of interviews since then that have been really positive, has given incredible speeches, got standing ovations at the NAACP conference. You know, like, I mean, it makes no sense to me. It makes literally no sense to me what they are doing. And, you know, I think that the fact that we are in this place doesn't bode well. You know, I will tell you all that however this plays out, because I think this is kind of like the takeaway that I want to give you guys today, because there was someone who was like, please give me some hope. If he does step aside and it is Kamala, like, we're all in, right? I mean, I think everybody understands that. That is going to be like a no-brainer move. And essentially, I'm not going to like it. in terms of the choice to step aside, because it will have been because of media and pundit and white Democratic pressure. And I think that would be a capitulation of the highest order at this point. But if that is the outcome, we still have to fight like hell. Okay. I am very worried, however, at the idea that a certain chunk of the white Democrats that are calling for Biden to step aside won't get behind Kamala Harris. I'm extremely worried about it. And that, in my mind, is like disaster. Okay. So I want to be really, really honest with you all about where things stand. And, the word has it that notwithstanding these meetings with Schumer and with Jeffries and the call by Adam Schiff, that Biden has been like, I'm staying in. And I think he should, by the way, because like literally the voters are telling him that that's what they want. Okay. And the fact that there is this like slight concern about the polling. I mean, you all know how I feel about polls. I have not seen a poll yet that says something that would require Biden to resign. And I'm just going to say one other thing. I know MSNBC was reporting on some crazy poll that 31% of Black women were ready to step away from Biden. I'm just going to tell you something. I do not buy that for a second. I don't even need to look at the polling methodology. What is out there on Threads, the anecdotal evidence, the statements from Black leaders, the statements from Black organizers are enough. They're enough. Like they know what they're talking about. So I think at this point, we have to really be thoughtful about where this is all going to lead, right? Because right now it looks like the Democrats are self-sabotaging into another Trump presidency, which, by the way, is the end of America. I truly do not get it. And frankly, I think, as always, it would be a very good idea at this point for folks to call Schumer, to call Jeffries, to make those phone calls to the Hill, to your senators and your reps. I know we talked about this earlier in the week, and I know we talked about it last week, but I think it's really critically important at this point that you make those phone calls. Make your voice heard, okay? Tell them that you support the Biden-Harris ticket. Tell them why. We had a member on the Patreon feed who said that they literally burst into tears when they called Jeffries' office yesterday, and I get that. These are very scary times. And to watch your own party do its own circular firing squad over and over again is, I think, something that no one had on their bingo card for 2024. I mean, I'm just like completely appalled by it. And I think the folks who are calling for, see, this is the other thing I just have to say here. Like, there's people in the feed right now saying, swap Biden and Harris. They don't have any plan. There literally is no plan. The people who are calling for Biden to step aside have no plan. Like, it would be one thing if they were like, Biden should step aside and it should be Harris, and Harris should pick her own VP, right? If that was what they were saying, fine, but they're not. There's no unity around that idea. And I'm not saying that that would be right, because, by the way, so many millions of us voted for a Biden-Harris ticket in the primaries. Like, essentially what they're doing is disenfranchising everyone who already voted for this ticket. It's not like Joe Biden has gotten like any significantly older since the primaries ended, and they're not, I mean, it makes no sense. It just makes no sense. And us making these kind of comments at this moment in time is just not helpful, right? Like, this is what I said. I answered a couple of questions from some organizers in our private community earlier in the week. And, this is the message, okay? The message is this: Joe Biden is the nominee. He is the nominee. Vice President Harris is his vice president. And until something changes, we are all in on Biden-Harris. You know why that has to be the messaging? Because anything else is giving ammunition to the Republicans. Anything else is giving ammunition to fascism. Like, truly, I don't get it. I don't get what on earth these senior white leaders in the Democratic Party are thinking. I think it's just like so insane. Okay, I want to answer a couple of other questions here. Okay, we mentioned Biden's COVID diagnosis. I just want to point out something here that I think everybody should be thinking about, right? The second that Biden is diagnosed with COVID, we have public reports of his doctors. We have statements about what his symptoms are. We have statements about his treatment, right? We're told that he's self-isolating at his home in Rehoboth, right? We know exactly where he is. Everything is public generally. I'm going to tell you what we don't know, okay? We still don't know what it was that actually cut Trump's ear. We still don't know anything about how the people behind him got shot and he didn't. We don't know anything at this point about his treatment, where he was treated. Word has it he went to a hospital. We don't have anything about that. We don't have any doctor's reports. We have no understanding of like his plotted recovery, whether he was evaluated for any further damage to his body or his mind. Nothing. And so the idea that we now have the mainstream media freaking out about him having, COVID at this point. I know we've got some trolls on here. I got this person. Bye. freaking out about Joe Biden being diagnosed with COVID when Trump's over here with like literally like a huge cover up and his acolytes wearing like bandages on their ears because it's a cult, is yet again another example of the hypocrisy that we're seeing, right? The media is 100% complicit in how this is going down. It is a capitulation in advance. We talked about this on Tuesday. It's really distressing to see particularly left-leaning journalists that we've relied on for a very long time going off the deep end on all of this. Personally, I have to thank Joy Reid because she is calling out her profession nonstop right now, not just for the hypocrisy, but for falling down on the job and for like literally endorsing essentially like a horse race between an insane, deranged fascist and an old guy, right? I mean, I think at this point, we can't stop recognizing that there is ongoing hypocrisy and we need to call it out whenever we can. Okay. So, just please be mindful of that. Speaking of calling it out, I do want to mention George Conway's new initiative, which by the way, is so long overdue. Those of you who have been here on the broadcast, please stop talking about Gavin Newsom. He has already said he's not going to run. I mean, like seriously, people need to pay attention to what is going on. And I'm just going to say something. If Gavin Newsom were to take over the role in this, again, I'm going to say it. The voting base of the Democratic Party, namely Black women, would stay home. People really got to think. Why do you want another white man at the top of the ticket if Joe Biden steps aside when Kamala Harris is right there? Why would you say that? That is your own white supremacy speaking. It is your own internalized white supremacy speaking. Please do your work. Okay? All right. I want to just talk for a second about George Conway's new effort because everyone has been, okay, I'm going to get rid of this person also. Everyone here who has been here for the last 7.5 years has heard me talk ad nauseum about Trump's malignant narcissism, his sociopathy, his psychopathology, and the way in which it works. Okay. A lot of the general public is not aware of any of this, right? They're not aware that he has every characteristic of malignant narcissism, according to the DSM, which, by the way, is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that's applied by the psychiatric professions when they diagnose people. He literally checks every box. Okay. He checks every box for an antisocial personality disorder. So George has undertaken, thankfully, this incredible effort at this point to educate the public about Trump's psychopathology because the media isn't doing it. He has a new initiative where he's going to do this live. He did a live event in Milwaukee last night where he held up like literally the DSM diagnostic criteria and talked to the public about the ways in which Trump meets these criteria. Okay. We need to be talking more about this because, by the way, whatever's going on with Joe Biden, which, by the way, I think is just that he had a bad night. I'm going to repeat this. He's been very sharp in every other interview. He's in fact been hilarious. You know, I have to remind people of confirmation bias here because there was somebody on the Patreon feed this morning that was like, I watched that interview that he did with Lester Holt and, you know, he looks like he's got problems to me. All right. I have to say something. All right. Once you have been fed the talking point over and over and over again that there's something wrong with Joe Biden, you have to fight the confirmation bias of that with what you see. And this is my moment to tell you that what the fascists are trying to do and the mainstream media is complicit in is telling you not to believe your own eyes and ears. Okay? They're sitting here telling you, oh, you know, Biden's got something wrong with his brain, right? Biden's got something wrong. He can't string a sentence together. And you hear that enough. You start to query, well, you know, if this person is saying that, maybe it's true. Somebody else on the Patreon feed this morning said, well, you know, if Schumer has raised concerns, I mean, that seems pretty legitimate to me. Maybe I should consider it. This is exactly how confirmation bias works, because what starts happening is that you start to doubt your own perception. You start to have a moment where the evidence that comes in gets filtered through that lens that you've already started to question, right? Rather than like actually seeing what's going on, actually seeing how he's performed in these speeches, how he performed at NATO, how he performed in front of like enormous Black audiences and what the reception was there, how he has performed in interviews. I mean, seriously, I have these moments where I just think to myself, like, this is what's so dangerous about propaganda. Because it's literally like being beaten in the head with a brick over and over and over again with something that is false or something that is designed to make you change your mind. And you have to be very, very astute and sharp to be able to resist it. Okay. And I know there are going to be people on here who are like, well, you know, like maybe there's like a psychiatric professional who would diagnose him. You know what? We've talked a lot about that too. And I'm just going to say, this is one of the reasons why the Goldwater rule has existed for so long, that you're not supposed to be able to diagnose people from afar. All right. I'm just going to say this. if you are looking at Biden and saying Biden should step aside because he has a problem, what are you saying about Donald Trump? And why are we not talking about that? Thank the gods that George Conway is, right? Because what he's trying to do is counterbalance all this propaganda over here, right? That's giving Trump a pass. That's giving him a pass. He fell asleep last night again in the middle of his own son's speech. He fell asleep last night again while his vice presidential nominee was speaking. He slept through the RNC for 2 nights running. I mean, like, it is appalling that that is not front page news on the New York Times and the Washington Post and every major website in the country. He's sleeping through his own convention because he cannot stay awake. And you know what that's a symptom of, by the way, in case anybody's wondering? Advancing dementia. So all of this, I'm going to get rid of this person. Bye. All of this is something that, oh, we got another bunch of people on here. Okay, the trolls are going to go away. You're going to go, and I'm going to unpack my troll bell as soon as it gets here. And I'm just going to like ding you guys nonstop. Okay, so in any event, I just want to remind you all that we have to continue talking not just about Trump's own issues, which are so obvious, right? Like, this is the other thing. The Biden stuff is like random speculation based on like a 45-minute performance at a debate, okay? Trump, we have literally at this point 9 years of evidence and beyond. Like, let's just like go all the way back to the Central Park 5. Let's go back even further than that. We have decades of evidence of first of all, the fact that he's unqualified. We've got at least 9 years of evidence of his decline. By the way, we've talked about this, about how I went back and watched some of the earlier videos versus the current ones. And, you know, like where he was 4 years ago versus where he is now. Oh my goodness. Like, it's shocking how poorly his verbal performances, his aphasia has gotten worse. I mean, like the rants that he runs off on, the fact that he can't find words. I mean, like, again, I just have to point out, it is not just hypocrisy at this point to be like randomly speculating about Biden on the basis of one 45-minute night when he was sick and not calling out Trump. Like, it is actually enabling the downfall of democracy. And I'm not exaggerating by saying that. So, you know, we've got to really focus on that. And I'm really glad George has taken up this endeavor. I think it's going to be really useful for us all to watch. I think we should watch. I'm just going to mention, by the way, Bandy Lee, who was a part of The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, that book that came out. She edited it. She was a Yale professor. She spoke at a conference that I ran in 2018. And I'm just going to tell you, it's not like people haven't been calling this out with regard to Trump now for like years and years and years. And the fact that these people have not been amplified and we're now in this mess with Biden, it just like completely blows my mind. All right. Let's move on to just a couple of other things here. There were some comments about not just about the Republicans and this like mass deportation now, obvious fascist talking point. You know, I'm just going to remind you all that like forced migration of groups of people on the basis of their identity, their race, their national origin, their history in terms of like, you know, any aspect of a protected group, okay, is a definition of genocide. Okay, just so we're all really clear on this. You're going to round up every immigrant in the country and deport them. That it meets the definition, one of the definitions under the UN definition of genocide. Like, that's what they're endorsing. That's what they're endorsing. Okay. So just like, we can't not be clear about this. I'm also just going to point out, however, that somebody asked on the Patreon feed this morning about the long game here. And one of the ways in which, you know, the backers of the Republican Party, and this is very, very true, the Koch brothers, one of whom's dead. I know, but that's still how we refer to them. The Mercers, various other folks like Leonard Leo, like Harlan Crow. They've been playing a game of decades to gain control of state legislatures, the federal legislatures, and the presidency so that they can enact this kind of Christo-fascist worldview. All right. And this has been documented. This is like what they're after. They're after like a culture shift that takes them back to like the 1950s, where white people, at least in perception, had all the power, right? And, you know, that like there was dominance and there was Jim Crow and there was no right to abortion. And, you know, like women were supposed to stay at home and cook, right? And, you know, like, God forbid you were LGBTQ, you could be arrested and thrown in prison. This is what they want. All right. And yes, it has been a very long game. And yes, they are continuing to play it. How do we know they're continuing to play it? Because unlike our party, When their candidate can't string a sentence together or goes off on a rant about windmills killing birds or drowning in a boat with sharks and batteries, they're like, oh yeah, he's totally fine. That's our guy. They have people standing up at the RNC right now claiming that they're the party of law and order. And they believe that people who commit felonies should go to prison with literally no irony attached to that at all. At all. So one of the things, again, that is really disturbing about this moment in time is that there is no simultaneous, consistent messaging on our side of the fence right now. And there needs to be. There needs to be. Yes, it's a long game and we should be playing our own. And I've been saying that, by the way, since all of you found me back in 2016. I've been saying that for a very, very, very long time. Okay. Let's see. People have been asking about the virtual vote that the DNC is planning to host. So I have to remind you all that there's this thing this year about the DNC being after the deadlines in several states for the electors to vote to put somebody on the ballot. And by the way, I'm going to remind you all, in 2020, because of COVID, because of lockdown, there was a virtual vote anyway by the DNC to nominate Joe Biden. Okay. So the virtual vote is not unusual. It's not a problem. Nobody should think it's weird. It's being done to make sure that the ballot consistently has Biden-Harris on it everywhere, like in Ohio, where the deadline happens to be in advance of the DNC. Now, one thing that I just want to mention here in relation to this is that there are rumors that certain, again, white Democrats have been calling for the virtual vote to be delayed. And that seems to be because they don't want to have a virtual vote to nominate Joe Biden because they are hoping they can push him aside. Again, go back and watch from the beginning of the broadcast. I have no idea how that's going to play out, but that's what it's about. But nobody should be buying the idea that there's something wrong with the virtual vote. Like the DNC has done it before. This is actually a protective mechanism to protect the ballot in the states that require a deadline of a nomination in advance of the dates of the DNC, which, by the way, are very late this year. Usually everything is held back to back in July. The DNC is, of course, being held in August this year. And that's part of the reason why that is taking place. Yes, I know we have tons of trolls here. And I had to go back the other day and go through them. And I will. Don't worry about it. I will get the various folks who are here. I'm going to remind you all, the fact that we are being trolled shows the impact that this broadcast is having. And so, we'll get them. Don't worry. You guys can also block them, by the way. You can't block them for everybody, but you can block them for yourselves. Okay. Let's just talk for a second about the efforts that are being signaled by Republicans to steal the election already. All right. Because there's been a lot of worry about this. And some of the worry has come because Mark Elias of Democracy Docket and, Elias Law Group has been out there talking about the fact that there are all these efforts underway in swing states right now to already skew the vote or throw out the vote if it goes for Biden. I've been warning you guys that we knew this was going to happen literally since the end of last year. There's no question in my mind that the Republicans are going to pull whatever shenanigans they can find. All right. But the idea, here on the Patreon feed, by the way, I'm going to remind everybody, I keep referencing this, but if you want to ask me questions, you've got to become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistance live. They start at as little as $5 a month. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. You should get in on it if you have things that you want to ask me. Okay. Because you get a question feed at least 2 hours before every broadcast to ask me questions, and I will answer them on the broadcast, or if I can't answer them there, I will answer them in writing. One of the questions that I was asked, many of the questions that I was asked about this particular issue were infused with panic. How do we stop them from stealing the election? All right. So I have to point something out about the way that this is being discussed, which is one of the things that's kind of bothering me about it. It's this sort of fear that it's already over and done with that is being laced through comments about what the Republicans might try. All right. They're going to steal the election anyway. Why should we bother voting? By the way, that is a very common trolling point by bots that are appearing to be Democrats right now. It's all over. They're going to steal it anyway. Democracy is done. Okay. That is not a legitimate pro-democracy talking point. The pro-democracy talking point is this, and I'm going to give it all to you, and I want you to take it in and listen to it. Okay. The pro-democracy talking point is we're going to fight like hell to wipe the floor with them with numbers of turnout that are too big to be disputed. And then they're still going to pull those shenanigans, and we're going to fight them in court like we did last time, and we're going to win. That's the pro-democracy talking point, okay? Because I'm also just going to point this out. If we vote in such extreme numbers that there is a mandate given to Biden-Harris, and we take back the Senate with anti-filibuster senators, and we take back the House, right? And we do it at a watershed moment for American democracy, it is going to be extremely difficult for them to make any arguments that like they should win instead. The answer to all of this is voter turnout. It is getting out the vote. It is mobilizing where you live. It is making sure that you get at least 5 people who didn't vote last time to vote in this election. Like, that's the answer. That's the answer. Okay, the answer is not to panic. The answer is not to be like, it's already over, they're going to steal the election. The answer is to do the work, because they're going to pull the nonsense anyway. And what we have to do is set up the best possible scenario to win no matter what they do. No matter what they do, okay? It's going to be a lot harder to contest 100,000 votes blue in Georgia than 11,000, whatever it was that he was demanding in that call to Raffensperger, right? So that's what we really need to focus on. And again, I want people to remember that even at moments like this, the thing that will ground you is the reminder that participatory democracy is about power belonging to the people. And I know it's really scary right now because we have all of these like oligarchs, like American oligarchs, suddenly deciding to go all in for Trump. Musk, we know who he is. He's just motivated by anti-trans hate because his child came out as trans. You know, like Peter Thiel all along has been like extremely far right. Mark Anderson, these folks who have ties, by the way, all the way back to South African apartheid regimes. In case you were wondering, you know, there's plenty of reason to be worried about the money that they're sinking in, but I'm going to tell you what money can't buy. Money can't buy your conversations with your neighbors. Money can't buy door knocking and shoe leather work by Democrats who really care about getting out the vote. Money can't buy that. Money buys television ads, okay? Money does not buy deep canvassing, talking to your neighbors about Project 2025, making sure that you're driving people to the polls, making sure that your neighbors know how to vote, right? Big money can't buy that. And, you know, I have to just remind everybody that at moments of panic, the solution to all of this lies with us. It lies with us, okay? And your fatalism doesn't help. You know, I mean, again, while I was flying across the country yesterday, there were a lot of people talking about hope and how desperately we need hope right now and how necessary it is. Joanne Freeman, the historian, was talking about it. And I was reminded of Mariam Kaba, the great prison abolitionist, and her talk about how hope is a practice. Okay. Hope is not something willy-nilly that you hang on to when something good is happening. You have to practice hope every day. And if people who are working to counterbalance 500 years of white supremacy in America, a prison industrial complex that incarcerates 1 in 5 Black men in America, if people who are doing that work have hope, like, who am I to not have it? Who am I to abandon the prospect of a better future because some Republicans are claiming that they're going to steal the vote? Who am I to do that? Right? Like, that's capitulation in advance. And we've spent so much time here talking about how you can't capitulate in advance to fascism. Like, number 1 rule in Timothy Snyder's book, do not capitulate in advance. And the only way that you can do that is if you maintain hope for the future. And I believe in us. I actually continue to think that this could be a watershed moment for American history. I'm a little worried about what's happening in the Democratic Party, albeit, as we talked about at the beginning of this broadcast. But there is no way that we do not need to progress forward toward November with as much hope as we can possibly muster. And with the belief that we can win. And not just win, but win by overwhelming numbers, which I still think is like also dramatically possible, provided that, like, you know, it's Biden or Harris. You know, if it's anybody else, I think, I don't even want to go there. All right. So, you know, that really is my recommendation. Now, related to this, I had a question this morning about what to do when activism doesn't help, because we spent a lot of time here over the last 7.5 years talking about action as an antidote to fear, despair, anger, that, you know, like taking action usually in community helps a lot. Okay. So I'm going to say one thing. Let's just say hypothetically you have a really bad text banking session where you're texting with people and you're getting like obscenities and nastiness back. That, first of all, tells me that the donor and data list you're working with is not effectively screened. But the other thing that I'm just going to tell you here is that everybody has days like that. I have a really good friend who's been text banking out of her home in Brooklyn who had a day like that. It was like, literally, I was, you know, text banking on behalf of a Veterans for Democracy organization. I was just getting back garbage. That might happen, right? That might happen. You also might have a day where you do the work and you still are feeling in despair. That's normal. All right. There will be days that will be great. There will be days that will feel like an enormous amount of work. You know, one of my dear friends who is helping me move across the country, who like oversaw my move out of my house in California while I was flying across the country yesterday, you know, she door knocked for Katie Porter's campaign something like 800 houses in the last couple of weeks before Katie Porter's last election run. She was literally door knocking at like 7 p.m. on election night to get out those last few votes. That's not fun, right? That's not the kind of work that you do when like, you know, you're expecting to just be like joyous about it. That's a kind of brutal volunteer work that is, you know, sometimes required, right? So the fact that you've had one bad day should not be enough to stop you. And I'm going to say something else. There is a difference between having one bad day doing that work or one day where you're just like too low on what's happening. And I get with everything that's happening on the Hill right now, why people would be, and being burnt out. Okay. Like, again, I have to remind people burnout is really real. If you've done like back-to-back canvassing sessions for like weeks straight and you're exhausted and you don't want to talk to one more person, that's burnout. All right. But if you've done one text banking session and it kind of hasn't helped to lift your mood, look, we are living through like incredibly difficult times, again, I was joking around with a friend of mine the other day about how when I was a little kid, God, you got to be careful what you wish for. But we were joking around about how when we were growing up, right, like in the 80s under Reagan, we had these moments where we were like, God, I wish I had been born earlier. Like, I feel like I missed my moment. My moment was like 1968, right? I'm going to tell you, I don't know, man. Like, you know, the moment that we're living through right now has so much revolutionary potential and simultaneously has so much at stake that, you know, I think we were born for the right time. But you have to understand that, you know, like, none of this work is going to be easy 100% of the time. None of this work is going to lift your mood 100% of the time. That doesn't make the work any less necessary or valuable, right? Like Mariam Kaba, again, has talked about how we are in a 500-year trajectory back from the first 500 years of white supremacy in America. So your work matters to move in the direction of bending the arc of justice, okay? Even if you're not seeing immediate results, even if we don't see immediate results in our lifetime. I've said this before also, right? It is incredibly important to do that, right? To continue doing that work. So my best advice is like, you know, again, take a pause if you need it, but don't expect that it's all going to be easy. And please don't expect that it's all going to be easy all the time. Expect that the value in the work is actually in trying to move the needle. And if you get one more person out to vote or 5 more people out to vote, or you get one person to understand how to register to vote or check their registration, you have made a difference and you should not stop there. Okay. All right. Last thing that somebody wanted me to talk about today, the former CEO of the SPAC, the Special Purpose Acquisition Corporation that bought Trump Media, was indicted yesterday for securities fraud. You all know I used to be a securities fraud lawyer. Many of you will remember that when this deal went down, I was on this broadcast saying like, this really doesn't smell right. This really doesn't smell right. Like, this smells like securities fraud. This smells like statements that they're not in negotiations when we all know they're in negotiations to acquire Trump Media. And lo and behold, they were. And that is exactly what he was indicted for. I just want to tell you all, okay? One of the things that is continuously being blown over by the mainstream media in this moment is the number of indicted criminals who are really deep inside the Trump campaign again. Right? Peter Navarro speaking on the day that he's released, right? Manafort was on the floor of the RNC. Rudy Giuliani fell over on the floor of the RNC last night, right? Over and over and over again, we were seeing indicted and actually imprisoned folks showing up in the inner circle of Trump. And this is yet another example where, like, you know, somebody who is very close to what Truth Social has been doing is now under indictment by the feds. So again, okay, that person's getting blocked. We do not endorse violence here, like, ever. So, all right. I just want everybody to understand that I know it's a really hard time, but I also want to remind you of one other thing before I go, because this has been a much longer broadcast than I anticipated. And it's this, okay? Whatever the outcome is of, you know, all of these white Democrats calling for Biden to step aside, however this goes down, again, I have to remind you all that, like, the battle continues. All right. And I really hope that if he does step aside, it's Kamala. I really hope he stays in. Like, I really hope he stays in, period, because that's the winning ticket. But however this plays out, okay, if there is a need to pivot, we're going to pivot, right? Because we have no other choice. It's democracy or the end of America. You know, like I said to somebody the other day who was asking me about third-party voting, that you either vote for Biden-Harris in this election or you never vote again. Or you vote the way they vote in Russia, where your vote is actually like fabricated, right? Like it's end game stuff. And we've got to stay focused. And we've also got to keep in mind that all of the hypocrisy in the media is a reckoning in the media. And we've talked about this quite a bit over the last few weeks. I don't want anybody to forget that the media has had an unfortunately really destructive role to play in all of this. And we should be calling that out consistently, no matter what. All right. Please don't engage in voter suppression, by the way. I'm seeing some stuff going by here. Like, just do not. Like, don't tell people all is lost. Don't tell people that the election is over. Don't tell people that Biden can't win. Because, by the way, the other thing I just have to say here, and this will be my final note for the broadcast today, it's this. Women are always underestimated. And one of the things that has happened in these polls, there was actually a piece that came out about this a couple of days ago, is that they are not polling women in majority about how they feel about the Biden-Harris ticket. And we are in a post-Dobbs moment. Like, let's not forget that. And voter turnout that has blown through these polls since the Dobbs decision dropped has been extraordinary, from women turning out to vote for Democrats, for pro-abortion initiatives in numbers that have never been seen before, right? Just go look at what the initial polling was about, for instance, the Ohio abortion ballot initiative versus the actual turnout. Okay. This is one of the things that's really bothering me, by the way, about the way in which people are predicting people are going to vote for Biden, because we have proven the polls wrong over and over and over and over and over again, over and over and over again. Like, polling is broken in this country. Like, anybody who's looked at it knows that. So the idea that on the basis of like one poll over here, one poll over here, Biden should drop out. I mean, come on. Point being, in any event, that, we really do have to remember that there is an enormous voting bloc out there right now that is mobilizing as we speak. And my plea here, particularly to all the white cishet men who watch this broadcast, is that you please start talking to other white cishet men about Project 2025. Because the one polling that I do rely on, which is usually the stuff out of YouGov, which is fairly predictable, is showing that white men right now are the biggest problem in this election. I know that's no shock to anyone, but I'm going to say this. Women do the vast majority of volunteering and mobilization work for elections. Okay. Black women in particular, but there's a lot of women, generally speaking, doing it now. Okay. And I will just say this. Every single time that I have canvassed, the only men who have been there doing that work are high school students and college students who are volunteering with other groups. I have literally never seen a man my own age doing a canvassing shift. And that's really problematic. Okay. Because anybody that you care about who is in a marginalized group right now is going to lose their rights if we don't win this election. So anybody that you care about who is not a white cishet man, you should be out there canvassing and talking to other white cishet men about what's at stake in this election in Project 2025. Just please do it. Okay. Like, don't be afraid. Have those conversations. It's so necessary. All right. That's it, everybody, for today. I will be back here tomorrow at regular time. Please bear with me. I am so exhausted right now until we are set up here. I may at some point next week, take a day off to just try to get some stuff set up in my house. But I really do want people to kind of stay focused right now on outcomes. Biden and Harris are the ticket until they tell us otherwise. And I hope they don't. And we've got to stay focused on mobilizing the vote and keep bye. I'm going to ban this person too. Oh my goodness. We've got a bunch of trolls on here who I'm going to get rid of. Bye. We got to stay focused on the positive outcomes. All right. That's it, my friends. Lots of love to all of you. Please don't forget to share this broadcast. I love the thumbs up. Yes, you should subscribe. Yes, you should become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive to support this broadcast. But more than anything else, share this broadcast with anybody that you know who needs it. All right. Much love to all of you. I will catch you all here tomorrow, regular time. And before too long, we're going to have a discussion about time slots for the broadcast going forward. But today is not that day. All right, my friends. Lots of love to all of you. I will catch you all soon. Take care. Bye.